What do you call a famous Mongolian with a weak mindset? Hi, welcome to the Authentic Action Podcast. I'm Angel, and today's topic is victim mindset or uh, fixed mindset, victim mentality, and why your victim mindset is probably holding you back or how it might be holding you back. A little of both, actually, is what I want to dive into today. So, um, you've probably heard the saying, whether you believe you can or whether you believe you can't, either way, you're right. Something to that effect. There's lots of versions of it. And indeed, I do believe that's true. And that is very much related to what I want to talk about and what I have been writing about in my upcoming book, The Shift, which, by the way, is just about on the pre-sale uh, sign up mode. And you should be able to find a link to that. Get on my email list if you're interested in being one of the first to read that. In that book, I am diving deeper into why we self-sabotage, why we get stuck in that victim mindset or that fixed mindset, how it's quite normal, actually, part of the human condition, and also really being amplified in our current society, our social media and our old school, our new school and our old school medias are more and more learning to capitalize on our dysregulation or negative feelings or being shut down or wanting to shut ourselves down because we don't really know how to feel our feelings without being dysregulated. And part of that is because we often spiral into what I call the pit of despair. I didn't make that up, but I think most of us know what that is, and that comes from that limited mindset where we think a thought that is limiting or blaming or, um, yeah, self-defeating or closed instead of open, such as, let me know if any of these sound familiar, like, why has this always happened to me? Or I never win, or I am terrible at that. All those and many more phrases that have a closed component. So there's really no opening, no possibility. We can make that opening often as simply as adding a word like yet. So I'm not good at that yet. You see how that opens up a little bit of possibility. And something like, why is this keep happening to me? Could be reframed to say, I wonder why it seems like this always keeps happening to me. Or, um, what am I doing that is recreating this pattern so that this keeps happening to me? You see how these are ways that we can change our language and create possibility or openings in our language, in our statements. And even if we're not saying things out loud, what really matters is the thoughts that we're thinking, what we are saying about ourselves to ourselves when we're by ourselves is really the most powerful, potent stuff. Stuff, yeah, stuff, words. They're like spells. And yes, speaking things out loud and writing things down are very powerful as well. And however, the thoughts that we think tend to be on repeat. So you might get, 100 or 1,000 to 1 of a negative thought, oftentimes even unconsciously repeating up in there. It took me decades to really start to become aware of this negative, abusive self-talk that was running in my mind a lot of the time. And it's been more than a decade since I set out to reprogram myself and deliberately change the words that I use, both internally and externally. And I have made great progress, enough that other people around me have noticed and commented on it. And I see that reflected in my external and internal world. And at the same time, I still am not perfect. I still catch myself in that negative internal dialogue regularly, like daily, if and sometimes for large portions of my days. So I want to share that because I think often it's easy to get into yet another limiting story and tell ourselves that there's something wrong with us because we're stuck in these negative thought patterns and that we must be defective or, you know, disordered or some other thing that starts with D these days. And that's the reason that we are stuck in this negative thought pattern. But as I mentioned just a little bit ago, that's actually quite a normal state for the human brain to default to the negative, to the fearful, to the worst case scenario, and to what's familiar. So often we get these programs, these limiting beliefs installed, both sometimes deliberately, but more often unconsciously into us when we're children. And in those first 5 years or so of life is when, we come in like more of a blank slate, so to speak. So all these programs are easier to take root and really then serve as a foundation that we then tend to build more and more of our beliefs and our experiences on. So it becomes harder and harder to root them out or change them. It is not impossible. There's great research showing that our brains are plastic, as in can be changed throughout our lives. In we're finding new and surprising ways that our nervous system is more adaptable than was once thought all the time. So that's exciting. And, I'll just put a pinky finger asterisk about quantum physics, quantum science, that whole field of exploration is quite exciting when it comes to thinking about potentials and being able to change our beliefs, our fixed mindset. Because as we learn new information, it makes sense that we could change our beliefs. So often we have these programs instilled when we're children, and they work well for us sometimes, not always, but even if they work really well for us when we're children, they might not work as well as we get older. And also, the world is changing. And newsflash, air quotes, things are changing so rapidly that most of us, if not all of us, can't even really keep up with those changes lately. I think it's fair to say. So, um, all that to say that often it's these limiting beliefs that are the main cause of our own suffering. And I want to pause there and make sure that I state that I am not trying to say that all your suffering is your fault or that anybody's suffering is their fault or that there isn't any victimization or any wrongdoings in the world by any means or that everything that's happened to you is your fault. I am not saying that at all. So I want to be clear about that. I do think that there's a correlation between how we show up in the world and the experiences that we have. But that's a deep dive for another day. And really, what I want to get at in this conversation is that even though there are many things that are outside of our control, both internally and externally, like I have a lot of hormonal roller coasters that I would put under that bracket of out of my control, at least for the most part. Um, and certainly there's politics and the climate and things that are, again, for the most part, all intents and purposes, practical uh, uses for this conversation out of my control, out of your control. And at the same time, there are things that are in my control. And the biggest one of those things is my own thoughts, my words, both that I speak and that I allow to run in my head. And maybe I can't stop them from playing in the first place, especially if I have all these negative programs that I do already up there in my head. But I can and have and continue to learn to recognize when something is playing in my head that doesn't serve me, that's a fixed mindset that's getting in my way, that's sabotaging my best efforts, and often is related to that victim mindset of blaming someone else or shaming myself or thinking that I can't do something or something is always or never. Again, those closed kind of words, that language. There's some red flag words like can't, should, always, never. Those are little red flag words that clue me in as I study this in myself that I might be, very likely might be using language internally or externally that is self-limiting, that is getting in my way. Um, Once I notice that, I can dig a little deeper if I have the time and the energy. And as I've practiced this, it's gotten easier and quicker. So it takes less time and energy to ask a little more, dig a little deeper. And that's as simple as asking questions. It does help to journal because you can kind of, most of us can, I can tap into more of the subconscious through writing. You get into that flow. It's a lot of research and yeah, a lot of videos already out there about that. So again, for another day, but find a way to get curious and get under that negative self-talk if you can once you recognize it and see if you can like root out what underlying belief is really under it. So for example, I might catch myself thinking, let's see if I can do a real-time example with one of my current limiting beliefs, which is actually a very very deeply rooted, old, reoccurring belief, but it's deeply rooted and it's been with me probably since maybe even the day I was born. But I've only in the last 3 to 5 years become increasingly aware of it as I have pulled it to the surface from way down deep there. And that is a belief that I'm unlovable or that people don't see me and they just want me to be unalive, that I'm not worthy of belonging on this earth or belonging in this life. Now, I know this is a very common belief because I've heard many, many others express often those exact words, but also very many variations of those words. And you may have some of those running in your own programming as well. And if you do, welcome to the club. um, yeah. The bad news is that is probably um, causing you a lot of unnecessary suffering, and the good news is that is causing you a lot of unnecessary suffering, and that means that you have the ability to deliberately change the way you speak and the way you think. Again, back to thinking about what is in your control and what isn't in your control. Your words, your thoughts, even your beliefs, believe it or not, are in your control. Maybe not as easily as as I might like, because it takes time, it takes programming, it takes work, and sometimes it's easier than other times. It certainly helps to have a coach or a partner or someone to work with to really help call that out. And I've had the pleasure of working with some groups, and I am happy to say that I'm increasingly able to hold space and host, facilitate some of that community building, evolving out loud type of group where we can come together and practice holding space for each other and with all the compassion and gentleness in the world, pointing out to each other again with consent and understanding. This isn't just coming at someone with, hey, you're speaking negatively about yourself, but rather coming together in like a set container, a time, a space, with an agreement that we're going to work on this together and help each other notice when we're using language that is limiting or that points toward a limiting belief. Again, I've been working at this for more than a decade and it has brought a lot up. I've untangled a lot, and I don't know if I'll get to the end of it. It certainly has been, at times, a very painful journey and at times a very liberating and, in all cases, seemingly in a somewhat unavoidable journey, at least for me. I say unavoidable, and that's not really true. I chose to stop drinking alcohol, at least heavily. It's been over a year since I had even a little bit, and several years before that that I'd quit drinking for sport as I used to. I was pretty good at it, if I do say so myself, but glad that I quit while I was ahead, and that and many other shifts that I've made in my life, including a cascade of changes with regards to the people that I spend the most time with, that was really, like a domino effect of that one change of not drinking anymore for fun or for sport. I put in that caveat because I won't rule out that I might drink for, a ceremony or ritual, like a sip of wine, or, I have no problem having a taste of something just to see the flavor of it if there was something unique. But I have no desire to limit my own capacity to feel my feelings fully and be attuned to other people's feelings, which for much of my life that was just so painful that I've used alcohol and weed and sugar and shopping and all sorts of means to distract myself from my feelings. And I think the more I learn about this, and again, I've been writing this book specifically about how to feel our feelings more without being overwhelmed and how to take full responsibility for our emotions and our feelings, and then learn to process them in healthy ways. So as I've been on this journey, it has, of course, both forced and helped me to undergo that shift in myself. So I'm super grateful for that. I'm super grateful that I've had the opportunity, the time and the space and the energy to make that shift. And believe you me, at times I have not been sure that I did. It's been quite difficult at times, as I mentioned. And uh, also, it's certainly been worthwhile, and I'm very, very grateful to feel that I can hold space for others to come through that journey in their own way and in their own time space, but act as a guide or a coach or a cheerleader, a friend, um, perhaps a mentor or just an example. Sometimes I'm a good example, sometimes I'm a bad example. I do try to share my failures and my flaws openly in the hopes that um, two things that you can learn from my failures and flaws, because of course there's not really any such thing as failure per se. It's just feedback. And I believe if we're willing to take those leaps, make those mistakes, learn from those mistakes, and then share them openly, we can all move forward um, without having to make all the same mistakes, right? So I hope you will share those mistakes that you're making with me and others. And I am grateful that I can share mine with you. So, um, I would say one of the mistakes, and I'm using air quotes there because again, I don't really think there's mistakes, but one of the things that has really slowed down my own evolution and kept going so many of my own patterns of self-sabotage has been this victim mindset, this tendency to want to blame others or shame myself, or a lot of times little from column A, little from column B, some of both. And so it was really getting sick of my own shit enough to force me to confront this quite negative, often abusive internal narrator and start to make deliberate changes to my own programming. And yeah, I wish I could say I have like a magic pill I could give anyone to overcome that, but in my experience, it really does take being sick of your own shit first of all, or maybe being willing. There's probably other ways to get to it. I think that's the most common ways to bounce off the bottom, as I and many others have. But I was just thinking about a technique which is actually really good for helping to clarify what you really want so that you can check if your language, if the statements you're saying in your head and out of your mouth and in your writing, perhaps, you can see if that's aligned with your actual true desires. What do you really want? And a lot of times I find in my own life and in working with clients that people will say they don't really know what they want, or sometimes they say they know what they want, but they, for whatever reason, don't go after it. So here's a technique that I think I would call it rapid reframing, but I'm sure it has probably many names, and you might know it by another name. But if you spend just even 5 minutes on this exercise, you might find it profoundly helpful. And then if you can actually set up, like it's helpful to actually either draw or, make a collage or use your digital means to make an actual picture of these frames, at least one of them. I recommend doing both. We're going to do a best frame and a worst frame. Um, and in doing that, and then in putting the best frame, at least, you want to just zoom that worst frame away, and then you want to keep that best frame somewhere where you actually see it, like your phone screensaver, or, I like to put it up in my office and perhaps on my desk. You could put a folded up copy of it in your wallet where you're going to run into it, wherever you will see it a lot, in front of the fridge, on the fridge, maybe is a good place, or in the bathroom near the mirror. Um, and so let's quickly do this little exercise together. I will do other versions of this probably in a more intentional and focused way, but I'm going to just dive in and do a version of it now. So if you imagine that you're looking in a window at yourself 5 years from now, and just for a moment, think about that best life in 5 years, your best version of yourself in your best life. And then imagine that you're looking through a picture window or a frame at yourself, getting a snapshot in 5 years in that best life. And then start to notice, what are you wearing? What are you doing? Where are you living? What country are you in? What's the weather like? Do you have a partner? Do you have children? Do you have pets? Do you have plants? Um, what kind of clothes are you wearing? What kind of music are you listening to? What's your day looking like it's going to unfold into? Imagine that snapshot, that frame of that best you, that best life in 5 years. And really, again, spend 5 minutes or so just, if you can, journaling or thinking about all those details. The more specific, the better. Is there a pool? Is there a sauna? When I start thinking about my best life in 5 years, there's definitely a sauna. I think there's a truck. I think there's a partnership, or at least the sensation that I have uh, really fun plans to have an adventure with someone I love. Maybe there's a massage table there for some exchanging of body work, or a Thai yoga mat. There's probably guitars and drums around. I think I might have a housekeeper or someone to help me keep the clutter back. So that's just an example of spend some time thinking about what your ideal life is. And then if you can, make like a vision board or make on Pinterest or on, um, oh gosh, I know there's, is it Notion? I know there's lots of great places, apps and whatnot. And then I like just good old fashioned pen and paper or cutting up pictures, making a collage. There's lots of ways to make yourself a visual representation of that best life and put it in places where you're going to see it a lot and revisit it like at least 3 times a day, if not more. The more, the better. Um, Maybe not so often that you become blind to it, make sure that you're actually pausing to notice it and think about, like in my current one that I just mentioned, I might have a picture of a Rivian pickup truck or something that I like the sound of, or I might have a picture of a beach, or a sauna, or it could be something more symbolic, like a picture of a rocket ship to symbolize my rise to more financial success. Whatever, it's not a right or wrong answer to any of this. So, um, see if you can come up with that positive frame for yourself. And if you can't, and if you want to take it another step further, you might also add this worst frame. And in fact, a lot of times, like if I were working with you in a formal session, I would probably start with this worst frame and then zoom it away through a guided meditation and then create that positive frame. But this worst frame is helpful sometimes if you are having a really hard time coming up with any positive frame, if you're feeling hopeless, which again, I've been there for sure. So if you're having a hard time with that, then see if you dare um, to imagine yourself in 5 years with all the worst case scenarios coming true, all your worst fears, like yeah, your health is terrible, you're alone, you're broke, you're homeless, all your teeth fall out. I don't know, whatever those really terrible fears are. And just spend, not too long, 5 minutes max, maybe 1 minute or 2 minutes is better even, just imagining that worst case scenario picture of how bad your life could look if you were looking through a window at it, and everything bad happened. You made all the worst decisions and all the worst things happened out of every decision you made. And, every worst fear came true. Um, and take a minute or two to think about what that feels like. Maybe you have really terrible abusive friends. Again, I've lived a lot of aspects of that life. I think sadly many of us have, or maybe not sadly, maybe it's, beautifully, but I I just want to like remind us all that there's a wide spectrum of choice there. And again, all it's not all in our control, can't control all those circumstances. And even if we make all the right choices, everything isn't going to go exactly the way that we want. And probably we're not going to make all the right choices, and we can make better and better choices. We can use better and better words. We can learn to recognize those red flag words like can't and should and always and never, and replace them with words that create a little more space, like adding yet or um, seems like. Those are some of my favorite little quick additional words, and also just self-correcting along the way. Sometimes I do that by like getting silly and exaggerated. So if I catch myself saying always or never, I might lean into that and really play with, a playful, lighthearted version of that worst case frame of like always, and get a little melodramatic about it and just see the absurdity of it so that you can again create a little space. You lighten it up, you make it playful, and you open up your mind. You stop that that contraction that's happening when we're in that fixed mindset and that weak mindset and that victim mindset of feeling like, we can't get ahead or nothing is working out for us or everything is working against us or, the universe or the government or our family or our brother or sister or whoever it is our spouse, our children are conspiring against us. And, the truth is that most of the time, ain't nobody got time for that, as the saying goes. Like, most people are busy living their own lives and, mucking up their own stuff with their own limiting beliefs and living out their own, shit stories. Some of them are living out beautiful stories. I don't mean to be cynical about it. And that is, by the way, another red flag if you catch yourself, as I often do, thinking cynical thoughts. Again, that's in that same vein of, always and never and this type of person, those overgeneralizations that if you really stop and think about them with a calm, clear mind, it's easy to see how they're hyperbole, how they're not the whole truth and nothing but the truth, how they're also harmful to ourselves and to each other, to society at large when we, indulge in that sort of less than fully conscious, limiting dialogue, narration mindset where we're blaming it's you, it's them, they, all those are also, again, buzzwords. And I know, believe me, I know right now is especially challenging, and I will point out in that is special opportunity. Um, because of everything that's happening in the political arena and with climate change and there's just so much upheaval and so much unknown and so much change, so much um, potential conflict on the horizon, and just humans don't deal with change and unknown all that well in generally speaking. Did you catch that? That was one of those limiting beliefs. It seems to me like humans often don't deal with change and the unknown very well. And I want to help with that in any way I can. And I believe that we can learn skills that help us be more resilient and more fit so that we can navigate that more resiliently, have the ability to be more adaptable. And that's really, again, what my book, The Shift, is about. The working title was Emotional Fitness. And the analogy is just like with physical fitness, where it takes showing up regularly, it takes practice, it takes skills, it takes all those things together to add up to your level of physical fitness. And the same is true of your level of emotional fitness. It takes learning to get to know yourself. It takes learning how to feel your feelings. Takes learning how to communicate your feelings and process your feelings. It takes learning how to re-regulate yourself when you get dysregulated. It takes learning how to deal with other people's feelings and other people when they're not regulated, and maybe learning how to co-regulate with people, which is a fantastic thing that we humans can do, or we can bring ourselves into a calm, coherent state. With something as simple as a long, slow breath, often we can create that mirrored effect in other humans around us. And I don't know if that worked for you, but it is pretty neat to see how something as simple as one breath can begin to bring more coherence into our nervous system, and how we can have that effect on one another when we learn to use that deliberately. And as I mentioned, learning to recognize dysregulation, especially in its earliest states, and also recognize those limiting beliefs that often spiral us into that dysregulation is a really important key. Like maybe if you only had one key, if you had that key, it would be all you need really in order to shift your whole life from less than you want to be to all you ever wanted, and probably even more than you can imagine. Like when you look at some of the lives that some humans are living, it's easy to be resentful or envious, but the truth is, those people have often, maybe not always, of course, there's always exceptions, but often the people who are very successful in life and are living these lives that are easy to envy, those people have often learned how to not get in their own way, not tell shitty stories about themselves to themselves and other people. And in doing that, they have drawn more abundance, more wealth, more prosperity, more possibility into their reality. And this is available to you and I as well. More and more of it is available. As much of it is available as you are willing to shift yourself into, like, tune yourself to the frequency to receive. I know that was a long ramble. It's late here where I am, but I wanted to get this ramble in because I have an agreement with myself, and I'm the type of person that is continuously improving my ability to show up in the ways that I intend to and that I say I'm going to, purely for my own satisfaction. I do, of course, hope that you get something out of it as well, but I'm aware that there are many, many great avenues for us all to get positive input out there. So my hope is that I've added to that in some small way. If nothing else, perhaps I've encouraged you to add your own voice to this choir, if you will, of all of us starting to recognize that we can take more personal responsibility for our own lives and start to shift our individual and then our collective lives into more abundance, more wealth, more prosperity, more satisfaction. And no, I don't think that means that we'll never have any suffering, we'll never have any pain. I think there will still be death. I think there will still be, you know, things that don't make sense. I think there will still be bad things happening to good people. But I do also think that we can respond to them differently and we can not become the perpetrators of, that victim loop is perpetrated by it's just like the giving and receiving is a loop. There's a loop between perpetrating and being a victim. And when we step out of being willing to be victimized and own our own power, we lessen the opportunity for others to be perpetrators and victimize us. There is a connection there. And that's a topic I want to dive more deeply into in another conversation, but I'm going to just put a pin in it, so to speak. But I do welcome any of your thoughts or feelings or input about any of the things that I've shared in this episode. I also really encourage you to sign up for my email list and check out my free to anyone 2-minute tool PDF that I've put together with over 100 tools that are easy and free, or maybe not always easy, but simple and free for anyone who just wants to, find a way of healing, of developing more self-awareness. Yeah, joining me on this wellness journey, this beautiful blooming journey. So, um, I invite you to ask yourself, what is one thing I'm willing to do today to move further from that worst case scenario frame and or closer to that best case scenario frame? What is one thing that you are willing to do today that your future self will be grateful to your current self for having done? Is another way of saying that. So, I invite you to ponder that and share that if you want to. I'd love to hear from you. I encourage you to check out my other books and look out for my upcoming book, The Shift. And whether you do that or not, I thank you for being you and letting me be me. And I really am excited about what I see as a great opportunity woven into this time of great challenge for us all to learn to reduce unnecessary suffering and increase our capacity to adapt, to re-regulate, to bring ourselves back into a coherent state, and to change those limiting stories into stories of more possibility, more potential, more growth. Mm. I have a lot more to say about a lot more things, but I'm going to wrap this up here and come back to my very silly joke, which I've been trying to embrace lately. The jokes for these episodes often take me longer than anything else. And I know you would never guess that because they're not very good jokes, and that's part of the challenge, is I'm really trying to find not very good jokes that I like that are short and related to my topic. And I guess I'm bringing that up because I welcome if you have any great, really bad, short, really great and really bad short jokes that you think I'd like, please do share them with me. And back to the one I started with tonight. What do you call a famous Mongolian with a weak mindset? Genghis Khan. But you are welcome. Thanks for stopping by, and till next time, stay curious, stay courageous, and I'll be seeing you soon. Ciao for now.